the kids are home. There's a rumor that that the grandparents or whatever have moved in with us. That rumor comes from an idea that was thrown about in the early part of the case as a way to get the children home sooner. It was an idea that was not ever something I wanted to do, but of course would have done that if it would have brought my kids home sooner. I thought it was an insane proposition, and so did the county, frankly. The county attorney and the county services office were not interested in that. The judge didn't really seem interested in that. One lawyer proposed it. I never liked that lawyer. The lawyer who brought it up the first time, I was nonplussed and non-impressed with his non-performance. It was his baby, and he was like, oh, it's a great idea. No, it was a terrible idea, you weirdo. But hey, he brought it up, and so then it got bandied about back and forth. It was never really on the table as a viable option. Very silly thing. Was shot down over and over. But hey, one guy was really married to that idea. Go figure. But no, the kids are back home. They're back home full time. They're here now. They're asleep because it's bedtime. All of that. And it's great. It's really nice to have them back. To everybody who said otherwise, like, oh, Nick doesn't want his kids back. Yeah, okay. Yeah, your internet stuff is funny, but real life is real. And reality matters. And the reality of the situation is that 5 kids were put into really a lot of bullshit. And it's built on the backs of bullshit. And that bullshit takes a long time to fight and correct, especially when your rights are abridged during the process. So that being said, that phase is over, and now we move on to the criminal phase of our case. I say phases, they're separate cases. They just run parallel. But the criminal matter is ongoing. I cannot talk about it. Let me put a little asterisk there. People can always talk about their criminal cases unless there's a gag order. When I say in this instance about my criminal case that I cannot talk about it, I certainly can. I have the ability to. I have the First Amendment right to. But it's not wise to talk about most aspects of the case. And so those aspects of the case that should not be talked about, I won't talk about. There are a couple things that through this process I have felt comfortable talking about and issuing specific statements on. Usually it's a statement about Minnesota law, like when I talked about the filing of the long-term placement plans. Even though the children were not looking at long-term placement, I felt it would be useful to dispel the improper notion that they were going to be placed on some permanent basis outside of the home or a long-term basis outside of the home. Thought it useful to dispel that notion, educate people, say, hey, actually, Minnesota requires these timelines and things have to be filed by certain dates, even if they're not the trajectory that the case is going. So they run them parallel to what's actually going on, because there's always a chance that the people on the track will up and go off the track, and they'll have to go with the alternate plan. And once that happens, they're up against a statutory timeline. And so they have to run them both with the hope that the one thing goes right and the fear that the backup plan will need to be used. I tried to explain that because it's a point of Minnesota law and it doesn't actually say anything specific about my case. Other stuff I've talked about is rather general. I've talked about things like what Minnesota has to prove in our criminal case. They have to prove something called possession, probably constructive possession. There are elements to it. I'm not going to get into it now, but that's what they have to do. There are facts in my case that make this not the easiest thing in the world, and those facts may be brought before the court. People have consistently gotten things wrong about what's going on outside of the courtroom. I'm not always inclined to correct them, but one of them that happened early on, for example, was Lady Rackets and I both posted bond at the exact same time. For whatever reason, her bond did not get filed into her case, and people thought that I posted bond and she did not, and that there was some speculation about some rift or some plan or some setup there, when actually it was just a government mistake. The government has made mistakes all over this case. In fact, some of the documents that have come out, specifically unredacted documents, are due to some level of government mistake somewhere. That's just how it is. There's a lot of things that go on in these cases. A lot of people touch them, and mistakes get made all the time. I want that to be clear because people both underemphasize and overemphasize government mistakes, government malfeasance, and government maliciousness. They're not all the same thing. Government makes mistakes all the time. Those errors don't always and often don't have an impact on the overall case, but the mistakes still happen. The lack of filing of the bond for Lady Rackets at the same time that mine was filed probably was not going to have any income. There's a theoretical possibility that the bond not being filed could in some way lead to, like, that weekend before it got corrected, something happening that would look like a violation of release conditions that would then result in some sort of hearing, which would be annoying and possibly have like an arrest included, but it would be a mistake that wasn't anybody's like particular fault. But the likelihood of that was exceedingly low. So it wasn't that big of a deal. And there wasn't anything we could do to correct it, because I think we posted the bond, and then we found out that it hadn't been filed by Friday. And over the weekend, you can't like fix it. You have to wait till the next work day to do so. And when I went in to go fix it, it was already done. Like, they had already fixed it. They must have known about it. I'm guessing they got inquiries. I'm not sure. But that happens. People need to get out of their heads the idea that every government mistake is somehow impactful to the case. Some of them are just government mistakes. There are mistakes that can be very impactful to the case. We saw this with Alec Baldwin's case, right? It resulted in a dismissal. Some people think the dismissal is improper. Whatever you think about the Baldwin case, a mistake was made and it was very impactful. Whether it was the right impact, wrong impact, doesn't matter. Very impactful thing. In other cases, bigger mistakes get made and they don't do anything at all to the case. So when I'm saying that mistakes happen or didn't happen or whatever, people misunderstand things based on government mistakes sometimes, like, that's just the nature of the game. It's not always malicious. One of the things I said not too long ago is really true. When you start getting, one of the things is really true is a weird thing to say, but I'll say it. When you start getting into court cases and how government works and the machine of it, actually, I think Josh mentioned this on the forum as something I said. He's again trying to imply something that is more than what I said, but that doesn't, let's just do it this way. I said at one point that people overestimate what a conspiracy needs to be. It's not always a conspiracy that someone over. What happens is that one government worker not doing their job well enough in one spot can cause a ton of problems, even up to and including criminal charges and stuff like that. I'm not saying that happened specifically in my case before anybody accuses me of saying that. I'm not. However, there are little mistakes that have happened in my case that have caused great consternation at other parts of the case. And those little mistakes are probably inadvertent. But the point of that is to say that the system is set up in a way in which very small mistakes from one individual can have massive impact on the life of an accused person. The reason I bring that up is only to say this system is a meat grinder, and it is designed to wear you down, break you down, shame you, and destroy you. And if you don't believe that, get in it sometime. Actually, don't, because it's horrible. But that's how the system works. And just those little laziness or laxities can lead to big problems for people. That's a reality that exists. People should understand that all of your rights, all of the things that protect you, that's all paper, baby. Bullets have taken away a lot of rights, and cops have been let off for those bullets, even when the bullets fired are unjust. Obviously, no one was shot in this case. Thank Christ. No one was shot in this case. Could have happened, but it didn't.